Hi and welcome everybody. I just wanted to do a mini introduction because this is slightly a different kind of interview. Doug Bopst is our guest for today. He has a dramatically inspiring story, and I had him over as a guest speaker in one of my nutrition classes to speak to my students. And so you will see that interaction is within the context of a classroom. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you like it. And if you do at the end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little notification button so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you so much, and I hope it inspires you as much as it has inspired me. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Today, I have the pleasure to speak with Doug Bopst. Am I saying that right?
It's Bopst, but it's all right. At least you didn't say, most people say Bopst, so it's all good. At
Right.
least
No,
you got the vowel right.
I had watched your interview with Tom Bilyeu. Tom Bilyeu is somebody I'm obsessed with. I'll watch everything he puts out. And I thought it was so inspiring. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect and, we're having this conversation today. So thank you so much for joining and accepting my invite.
Of course, I'm happy to speak with your students, and thanks for the kind words and the support. I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So, Doug, would you share with my students and everybody who's watching a little bit about your background? I think it's just a phenomenal and such an inspiring story that you really don't get to hear about every day.
Yeah, I'll just share kind of like a little highlight reel. And if people are more interested in like more the other parts of my story and more in-depth interviews, just feel free to go to my website or watch the interview that you referenced I did with Tom Bilyeu. So today I've been a personal trainer for almost 12 years. I host a podcast called The Adversity Advantage. I've written multiple books. I'm a motivational speaker, all these things that sound great, right? But the truth is, back in 2008, I thought my life was over. I was incarcerated on felony drug charges. And at the time of my incarceration, when I went into jail, I had a horrific opiate addiction. I was selling drugs. I was incarcerated for selling pot at the time, which kind of, I guess, where things are now with marijuana being legalized, it kind of is comical. But back then, it was a much more of a big deal. So in jail on felony drug charges, opiate addict. I was severely depressed, anxious, just had thought that my life was over, had no self-esteem. I was like 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And what ended up saving my life was fitness when I was incarcerated. My cellmate got me to start working out. And at the time when I started to work out, I couldn't do a push-up, could barely do one from my knees. And with his motivation and encouragement, training me in there every single day, I was able to do a set of 10 push-ups and run a mile by the time my 90-day sentence was over. And I was just so motivated to finally like transform my life because I hadn't felt that good about myself like ever. And I was just so grateful that he like helped me completely reinvent myself during that time. And the reason I think it really helped me, it wasn't necessarily that I think push-ups and sit-ups just solved everything for me. It was what they did for me. It allowed me to finally get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like it was uncomfortable to start exercising. It was uncomfortable to work out in front of a bunch of grown men that I really didn't know and that I thought were going to judge me, right? It helped me develop some self-discipline and discipline that I'd never had. Like before I went to jail, I had 21 jobs by the time I was 21. Like I was the guy that would, if I didn't feel like going to work, I just wouldn't show up. I'd quit or I'd get fired, all because all I cared about was doing and selling drugs. And then so it helped me develop discipline because there were days where I didn't feel like exercising. There were days where I didn't feel like, eating better when I was incarcerated, but I had to, not only because my cellmate was holding me accountable, but because I wanted more for myself. And I envisioned how I would feel like after I envisioned how I would feel if I was just consistent doing the things I knew I needed to do. The other thing is that it helped me like learn how to reattach behavior to emotion. So for me, when I would get stressed, when I would get anxious, when I would get depressed, when something, bad would happen in my life and things didn't go my way, my coping mechanism was like, all right, well, where can I go get high? Where can I go buy a drug? Where can I do this to check out and numb the pain? And in jail, you can't do that, right? So I was forced to deal with my emotions and deal with stress in a healthy way. And so when I would get stressed out or I would get anxious when I was in jail, I would, be able to go for a run, or I would, walk if I couldn't run, if it was like earlier on in my fitness journey, or I would, do some push-ups, or I would talk to somebody. Like I found these different strategies that would help me, get through hard times. And then that, transferred into post-incarceration, to where when I got out, of course, like life just didn't become magically easy. No, like you still have struggles no matter if you're using substances or not, right? But for a lot of people, and for myself included, like substances become the solution to deal with life's problems. And now I had these other tools that could help me be solutions to deal with some of these problems. And so when I would be stressed, or I would doubt myself, or I would be worried about what was going to happen in the future, and so on and so forth, I would find time to exercise, call somebody, I'd go for a walk, I'd go for a run. And then the other thing that was really powerful for me is I learned how to use pain to my advantage. And I think pain can be a lever, right, that you could push down, where if you suppress pain, I think it makes your life worse. It did in my experience. Then if you use substances to numb pain, that lever goes down even more. It makes your life more painful. But pain, I think, also can be used to invigorate and inspire you, where you can, for me, I would think about like all the kids who bullied me when I was a kid. I would think about the girls who rejected me. I would think about my unhealthy relationship with my parents. I would just think about all these things that bothered me inside of me. And I would think about that when I would exercise. And so now exercise not only became this mechanism to deal with the pain in my life, it became a mechanism to help me process some of this stuff. And so I'm very blessed that my experience in jail, it taught me so much, but I think, those are three of the most important things that it taught me, among other things. And then since then, I've been on this mission to not only transform my own life through fitness, but now to help other people use fitness to change their lives. Like I said, I became a personal trainer almost 12 years ago, and have been doing that ever since. And then it's also inspired me to share my story, to help other people, to coach, to help other people, to help inspire them to turn negative into a positive, and to make the most of their second chance, and to also remember how far you've come and not how far you have to go. Because that was something that I think was also super big for me, right? In that no matter what kind of journey you're on, whether you're trying to transform your health, whether you're trying to transform your relationship, whether you're trying to transform yourself, is like you have to play the long game. And if you spend so much time focusing on the weight you haven't lost, the push-ups you can't do, the money you haven't made, the relationship you don't have, or whatever the case is, it's going to be pretty easy, in my experience, to be down on yourself, right? Because when we think about what we don't have, it tends not to be good, right? But if you can focus on the things you have achieved, you can focus on the small wins, you can focus on the small steps that you've taken, you start to build some self-confidence and self-esteem, because you're like, oh, I've done a lot more than I thought, or wow, I'm so much better than I used to be, or wow, I did these things that if you had asked me 3 months ago to do them, I didn't think I could do them, right? And so when I left jail, one of the other things that helped me was I asked my cellmate, I was like, how can I ever repay you? Because the ironic thing was, I cried the day I went into jail because I didn't want to go in for obvious reasons, right? Plus I had a horrific opiate addiction to detox them. And the day I left, I cried because I didn't want to leave. And my cellmate just said, pay it forward and don't mess up. He gave me a workout plan that I still have framed in my place, so I never forget where I came from. And that's what really transformed my life, was jail. And I'm just super blessed to be where I am today. I'm super blessed to be alive and being able to talk to you and your students, and just being able to share all the lessons that came from my experience.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I didn't know all of this. I think I knew most of it from the Tom Bilyeu interview, but there were some new things that I learned. So thank you for sharing that. So everybody, just let us know your questions and we'll take them, and Doug will answer all your questions today. I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think caused you to get into the whole opiate addiction in the first place, and this feeling of not being able to withstand discomfort?
I I just think that, growing up, I had this mentality of like, what's wrong with me, or why am I like this, or am I ever going to find love and find success? And the reason I say that is like, I was just dealing with a lot of insecurities as a kid. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 5. And it was at a time, I'm 35 now, this is 30 years ago. Like, people weren't really getting divorced, I guess, as much as they are today. The divorce rate, I think, was much lower. So it was very uncommon. I would see my friends whose parents were together, and I'd be like, why are their parents together and mine aren't? Like, asking questions like that.
Uh-huh.
And on top of that, I loved sports, loved playing sports, loved watching sports. And I was as unathletic as they come. I was super uncoordinated, never made the sports team. So again, I'm thinking to myself, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I different? Like, why are these kids who are the same age as me, or going to the same school, my same classes, like same friend group, like, why are they making these teams and I'm not? Like, why am I so different? And then the same kind of thing happened with girls, where, I never had a girlfriend in grade school. And that really bothered me because obviously we know now that, like, as you get older, you understand that external validation can't make you happy. But as a kid, as a guy, like, I think it's somewhat warranted that your validation in some way is based on whether you're getting attention from girls, right? At least it was for me. And because I say that I mean, and with saying that, I also realized that I was just constantly like looking for something or somebody else to like make me feel better about myself, because I wasn't feeling good. And I was looking to escape. And initially it started with food, and I would eat like more unhealthy food, I guess, than the average person, but still I was eating what I think a lot of other kids that I knew were eating. But I think I just maybe didn't have the best genetics, and I started to gain weight at a young age, and I started wearing husky pants at a young age, and started developing some body fat. So again, like, I had this mountain of what's wrong with me, And my biggest my big way to initially escape was through smoking pot. And when I took my first hit off a marijuana pipe when I was 14, I felt this massive weight come off my back, that I could finally be at peace with myself. I didn't have to worry about success or finding love or relationship, like none of that. Like, I could just be me for the first time. And that feeling became addicting. Right. So I started to smoke more pot. I started to sell it to support that habit. I started to just smoke more and more every single day. And I became addicted to that numbing feeling. And then that led to me, selling it. That led to me trying other substances. And then eventually the big thing that helped me numb all this pain was, Oxycontin. And it didn't just start with me doing a lot. It started with my life being in shambles because of the results that my choices and my lifestyle had created through what I was doing as a teenager. And then I just had also developed like crazy amounts of anxiety and panic attacks and stuff. And the only way to numb that pain was through substance. And that substance was initially a 5 milligram Percocet. And when I tried the 5 milligram Percocet, I felt that same feeling that the pot initially gave me. I was like, wow, like, the panic attacks are gone. I can be myself again. Like, this is super cool.
Yeah.
And then that became addicting once again. And then, but again, like, painkillers, in my opinion, are much more addicting than pot.
Yeah.
And I became addicted much faster. And, it just quickly was off to the races. 5 milligrams a day turned into 10, 20, 40, all the way up until I'm doing like 300-400 milligrams every single day of Oxycontin to support my habit.
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty bad. Like, I didn't have half of my left nostril was missing. It was just my gut was completely messed up. I mean, it was crazy times.
I can imagine. Yeah. And those are very, very tricky to detox from. So I'm going to ask you about that, but I want to give my students a chance. So give us all of your questions, take advantage. Doug can really help you out a lot, and whatever things that you probably are going through right now, I'm sure he's gone through all of that. As he just shared. So you can type it, or you can just, set up your mic. Don't be shy. Let's see. I do have something here. Okay, one second. Giselle, I have a question, Doug, but only if you are comfortable answering. If you can go back in time, will you be an addict again, knowing that you will become the person you are today? Ooh, great question, Giselle.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think it's something that I've contemplated a lot before. And like, I thought about like, I wish I would have made different decisions, or I wish I would have done this or that. But, being an addict and going through what I went through, like ironically, like gave me so many more gifts than I thought. Because when I was a kid, I didn't have self-confidence. I didn't have self-esteem. I wasn't into fitness. I didn't really have much purpose. I wasn't like an extrovert. Not that you have to be an extrovert, but I wasn't a good communicator. I got anxiety when I stood up and talked in front of people. And then because of me like getting completely broken down and having to rebuild myself in jail, and then what happened after that, it forced me to rebuild my self-confidence, build self-esteem, find purpose, find meaning, get really comfortable with who I was as a person, learn how to cope and deal with the stuff that now I'm doing, everything that I'm doing now. Because even like without the drugs as a kid, I was still like super shy. I was kind of timid. I had self-esteem issues, and the drugs just became a mechanism to cope with all of that. Now, there is like a couple things that I kind of regret just as a result of the process. And not that I don't sit here and I don't, cry about it all day, but, I had a pretty unhealthy relationship with my mom growing up as a teenager and into my early 20s because of, choices I made and everything. And the way I also view that she handled it. Now, again, I think that she was doing the best that she could with the situation that there was, right? But it still created this odd relationship between us to where I didn't live with her. I got kicked out of her house when I was 16, sent to my dad's house to live full time, which I wasn't as close with my dad as I was my mom. Changed schools all within 24 hours. At that time, it was my junior year of high school. And then that led to me having like some abandonment issues, a lot of resentment and anger towards my mom. And we just didn't have much of a relationship for years that would follow. And I've seen how that's impacted me as an adult, right? To where I just wish my relationship with my mom was different. Like I wish I like, I wish I was excited to like talk to her, excited to see her. Not that I like don't want to see her. It's just I know that my brothers who didn't make the same decisions I did at that age have a different relationship. And I love my mom. My mom's a great person. And I just wish that part of the story didn't happen the way it did. But again, what I've also understood is there's nothing, I can't go back and change the past. The only thing I can do is I can use the past as data, and I can use the past as ways to learn and to grow. And my mom and I have a great relationship now as far as things go. I mean, we're closer than we ever have been before. But again, like I think miss that deep emotional connection that most people, end up developing with their mom and their kids.
Yeah, great. Wow. It's kind of like what pretty much everybody says that has been through things like that, right? Like you never wanna go back and relive that past. At the same time, your struggle is your greatest advantage, right? And that's what allows you to be so successful right now. If it weren't for that, you probably wouldn't be the person you are today. So, but at the same time, yeah, you wouldn't want to wish that on yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll say, and I think I saw another question come in, is I thought when I was a kid, I thought that there were certain things that if I achieved these things, that it would give me happiness forever and I wouldn't have problems. Like all I wanted when I was a kid was I wanted like a six-pack, and I wanted to be ripped, and I wanted to date pretty girls, and I wanted to like look like I was successful and make good money and all that. And not that I'm like super wealthy by any means, but what I will say is that in my 20s, like after jail and after transforming my life and becoming a trainer, like I did have a lot of success. I did like get attention from pretty girls. I was, super ripped, as far as like the way I looked and my physique and everything. And I still was miserable, and I think it was because I had just chased these external things thinking that if I did these things that everybody would like me and I wouldn't have to worry about any problems. But what I found was like I had to really like myself first. Like I had to be comfortable with Doug before all those other things matter. Now, it's not to say that being healthy doesn't matter, because it certainly does. It's not to say that, relationships aren't important, because they certainly are. And it's not to say that success isn't important, because that certainly is as well. What I'm saying is that for me, I was using it to still fill that internal void that I'd never really dealt with, right? Because in jail, and then for the initial time out of jail, was more about survival. Like, I was doing whatever I could to just not go back to doing drugs again, right? And fitness was obviously the catalyst of that. But then once I realized that I could have some success with fitness and the way I looked and the way I like my physique and stuff, that kind of became like an addiction. And not like I wasn't spending hours at the gym addiction, but it was more like, how can I fine tune this? How can I get better? Like 5% body fat's not good enough. 6% body fat's not good enough. Like, let me try this diet, try that diet. And it just got me into a really dark place mentally, because I just felt like I had been chasing these things for so long that I thought if I achieved these things that I would be happy forever. And I just wasn't. And it took me like really understanding and realizing that like happiness is an inside job, and I really had to love myself first for these things to matter.
Wow, love that. Let me see. You said there was a chat that came in.
Yeah. Looks like Carolyn said, if you had free time in prison, what did you do during that free time?
Okay.
So a lot of things, I would say. I mean, it changed, right? Because initially when I got into jail, I was just trying to just buy my time, because I had no interest in transforming my life until my cellmate kind of gave me some hard life lessons and some tough love in the jail cell one night, as far as like him convincing me to stop being a victim when I was in jail. And so I was just buying my time and just kind of laying around, not doing much. But like once I got out of that daze a little bit, I mean, we would play cards. Like there was games like spades, pinochle, chess. We played chess. We played Scrabble. I got really into playing Scrabble, and I actually got into it even when I left jail. I bought a Scrabble game, and then eventually, with the iPhone, there's Words with Friends. I started to play that back in the day. And then there was also like TV. You could watch some TV. There was like a common room area that everybody would kind of hang out in during the day. And that's where people would play games. And then there was a TV that people could watch, certain channels on there. There was just, I think there was only, I believe, like maybe 1 or 2 TVs. And so there was that. There was books people could read. People could work out. Like that was like one of the things that really filled up my free time when I got into fitness. Was I would work out, like do some calisthenics, like push-ups and stuff in the morning. And then in the evening, I would run. It started with me walking, but eventually I started to run. And the cool thing about, not the cool thing, but I guess the odd thing about jail was I would use a deck of cards, because there was no there was no Apple Watch. There was no like tracker to see like how far I ran. And I would have a deck of cards, and every time I would like do a lap inside of the jail, I would move like a card from my one hand to the other hand. And then I would do another lap, move from the other hand to the other hand. So that way I could count like my laps with the cards. So it was like, all right, I ran, 3 cards, this night. Then I ran 5, then I ran 7, and then so on and so forth. But then I also had a lot of time to think, because, a lot of the masks that I had been wearing prior to being in jail came off, right? Where, now the mask of trying to fit in, the mask of numbing the pain, the mask of, creating drama to get attention, the mask of, fill in the blank. I mean, I wore a lot of masks to try to hide from a lot of the things that I was going through. And so I was forced to like deal with a lot of the stuff and think about like life and think about like my role and everything and think about what I wanted, which I hadn't really done before. And so it's just, again, there's a lot of free time, and just like anything in life, for me, like I was very blessed that I used most of my time in there to my advantage, and used it to do things that were productive and to make me, better once I got out. But yeah, it's definitely like a cool experience. Like I don't regret it at all, because I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about like being respectful. I learned a lot about, just making the most of hard times. And I also learned that I'd taken my freedom for granted, because I couldn't talk to who I wanted to. I couldn't go where I wanted to. I couldn't read, I was so kind of restricted when you're incarcerated. So a lot of good came from that.
Fantastic. So I know that our session is about to end at 9:50. So for the students who have other classes, they can't stay. And if you have questions, just drop them in the chat and I'll ask them to Doug, and then you can hear them later. But yeah, like don't worry. I understand that some of you have to go. I have a question. You said that even though you were shredded, even though you had everything you wanted, you still felt miserable. How do you deal with that when you reach that point? What did you do?
I mean, a lot of it was just through therapy and the way I saw myself, because, you know, as a kid, I was bullied a lot. And when you're bullied, I think, you know, your perception of yourself gets kind of warped, right? Based on what other people tell you and the lies that they may say about you. And then you start to believe those lies and you start to tell yourself those lies. And so I was, you know, called all sorts of names as a kid. I was told I was fat. And then on top of all that, I never had a girlfriend, which, like I said, like that was like a metric of I used for success, and like who I was as a person was like, all right, like if I'm attractive and I look good, I'm a good person, then, you know, girls will like me. And since girls didn't really have much interest in me, and I was called these names, I was like, well, maybe I am just unattractive, or I am this or that. And so I believed that a good bit of my life. And because I think that happened to me for years, when I started to become healthier and I lost a bunch of weight, I still saw that old version of me in the mirror. And it took a lot of self-awareness to like, because I was like, why do I see this person? You know, why do I still look and see the Doug that was younger? And, you know, therapy helped me realize like why that would happen, right? They were like, oh, it makes sense. If you were bullied and if you're called names, you know, throughout your childhood, then it would really make sense that your brain is just wired to still see that.
Okay.
And it really took a lot of just consistency in the way I talked to myself, the way I saw myself. Even like going back and like writing down, like a true story, I would write down like who I was in my previous life, and then I would write down what I'm doing now just to show the difference it is, because I still hadn't really believed that I changed it, because I think my back was so against the wall and the odds were so against me that I still didn't really believe that I did what I did. Like I really didn't.
Right.
I was like, I feel like I'm in a dream.
I hear that a lot, like on a smaller scale, when people lose weight, even though their bodies are changing, they still can't see that. They still feel like they're way more overweight than what they actually are. Yeah, the way that you see yourself, you perceive yourself, it takes a minute for your brain to adapt.
Yeah.
So, how did you stick to the diet? That's a hard one, especially having had addiction. And when you remove an addiction to drugs, a lot of people will replace that with an addiction to food. So how were you able to maneuver that and not go into that trap?
A lot of ups and downs. You know, one of the things my cellmate taught me when I was in jail was the importance of playing the long game. You know, because I was asking when we first got started, because I was like super excited to, you know, get fit just like anybody is when they start. I was like, how long is it going to take me to like lose weight? How long is it going to take me to get abs? Like all these questions. And he's like, how long you been like, you know, essentially like practicing unhealthy habits? I'm like, a long time. He's like, well, it's going to take a long time. And so that that was ingrained in my brain from the beginning, that was just going to take a long time. There was not going to be overnight success. And then I knew that if I was just consistent in not necessarily going from 0 to 100 with my diet, because I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is they try to unlearn and transform like 10, 15 years of unhealthy habits in a day or two. And it's just not realistic. So it was just slow progress. Like I didn't go from, you know, eating a ton of processed foods to eating all whole foods. It was like, all right, well, where can I improve in this area? Where can I improve in this area? And it was just a slow process. And then over time, I also incrementally made progress. And then when I got out of jail, I just was so motivated because I'd seen some results in jail, and then also in my mindset, that I just knew that if I just stuck to it and I did certain things, that I would continue to change. And I wanted more for myself, and I wanted to not let my cellmate down, and I wanted to not let myself down. And so it just started with, again, me eating a little bit better when I got out of jail, not eating as much processed foods, but still enough that it wouldn't feel like I was completely depriving myself. And then once, I started getting to another level health and fitness wise, and I proved to myself that I could stick to this. I was like, all right, like, where can I improve? And that became a slippery slope, because now I became almost like orthorexic, to where I was so, and for those of you, I don't know the exact definition of it, but I think the way it's defined is that you're just overly obsessed with eating healthy.
Yeah.
And that became unhealthy, because now I was afraid to like go out with friends. I was afraid to do certain things. I was like traveling on planes with like frozen chicken and broccoli. And again, no judgment to anybody who does any of those things. But for me, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was doing it out of fear, in that I believed if I, did certain things, that I would, start to gain weight, and then people wouldn't like me. Right. And then that led to that moment of, like, I kind of like touched on it about like how I got to a certain body fat percentage and I was unhappy.
Yeah.
And there was like nowhere else to go. It was like, I can't really get much leaner. Like, I can't lose more weight. I don't know where to turn. Like, I have to first get comfortable with who I am as a person, and then work my way up from there. And it was a big thing for me to now not use fitness to take up my entire life, and then it just became part of my life. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just it's so different for different people. All our journeys are so unique, and people use fitness for a variety of reasons. And for you, it was mainly for the psychological benefit. And then you realize it wasn't the answer. It was, I'm sure you're still living obviously a fit lifestyle and everything.
Certainly.
Right. But you're no longer doing it for the wrong reasons, basically.
Right. I think you have to find what works for you. Like, that's a big lesson that I learned personally. It's a big lesson that I've learned from training a ton of people over the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Is that, what works for one person isn't going to work for the next person.
Right.
And, they say with people who successfully like lose weight, it's like, or transform themselves, like adherence is like the biggest factor, I believe. Right. And so you have to follow something that you're going to be able to stick to. And I was always like, all right, well, that person looks that way, on the cover of a magazine, or that person does this. I want to know what they're doing so I can look like that. Right.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize was they looked like that for a variety of reasons, but they also did what worked for them. Right. And so I had to find that balance. And I also had to not just keep in mind, there's four, I think there's like, there's four pillars of your health. I think there's like your spiritual health, your physical health, your emotional health, and your mental health. Right.
Yeah.
And I was only considering mainly my physical health and a little bit of my mental and emotional health, because obviously I was still like looking to better myself and how I dealt with my emotions and stress and stuff. But I also was like, all right, like, is it worth me just eating clean 100% of the time and not having any kind of social life? Like, what is that going to do for my life? Am I going to be happy 20 years from now? Or can I step back, understand that just because I want to go out and eat a cheeseburger one night, or I want to go out and eat pizza, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to go back to the old version of me. Because that was part of it too, was I was so worried about not becoming the person I used to be, because again, like, it nearly cost me my life. It cost me my freedom, that I just wanted to do everything possible to not, imitate, any of those habits. Right.
Yeah.
But once again, I learned that I wasn't that person anymore. I started to like readdress who I was in the mirror, the person I saw in the mirror. I started to, write down, like I said, like who I was, what I was doing then compared to what I was doing at the present time. I started to learn that I'm not that person anymore. My identity has changed. So it allowed me to have a healthier relationship with food, because I would binge too. Like, I would eat, healthy during the week. And then I would go and I would like eat like a whole pizza and ice cream, like all in one night. And it just was super unhealthy. I was like kind of hiding it from people at the time. And now I've gotten to a place, I mean, I've been in this spot for the last, I don't know, probably 7 to 10 years. I forget exactly, time flies, but where to now where I just eat good, like probably 90% of the time. And, you know, I don't like have cheat days or cheat meals. It's like, well, if I'm in like a place like New York City that has really good pizza, I'm going to eat pizza, right? If I'm in
Right.
a spot that's known for like good homemade ice cream, I'm going to eat ice cream. If I'm in a spot that like is known for X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get that. So I don't go out and just eat fast food for the sake of eating fast food, but
Right.
I don't deprive myself when I know I could get like some, you know, good quality, you know, food. And then also in a way that it's like for the social aspect and I'm out with friends and stuff.
Right. And you're not struggling with binging anymore.
No, that was a long time ago. So it was during that time of where I was super lean and I was depriving myself and I wasn't going out with friends. I was like, traveling with chicken and broccoli on the planes and stuff.
Right.
Like, I was depriving myself so much that it just eventually you reach your breaking point. You're like, I need something, right?
Backfired. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how would you say you were able to recognize that pattern and get out of it? How long did it take you to do that?
That was a long time. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight, you know, and I think, you know, we're always going to have this struggle with, you know, how we look and how we want to better ourselves. And it's just more like, for me, the difference is how long do I let it bother me for?
Mm,
And is that the sole thing that I look for to make my life is that the sole thing that I look for to, you know, base the level I have in my life. And so back then it was more like just having hard conversations, going to therapy. You know, I was afraid that if I like gained a little bit of weight that my clients were going to fire me. And then I had like mentors in my life, you know, a good mentor of mine and friend like reminded me, he was like, you know, people didn't train for you because of the way you looked, right? Like, it's not like I was walking around in the gym with my shirt off and people were like flocking to me to train with me. No,
right.
people got connected to me because of my story and because they felt that I could relate to them. And
Mm,
so I had to remember that. And then I also was like, all right, like change is hard. Change is
yeah.
painful. This is another growing opportunity. And I'm really in a really painful spot now to where this obsession with the way I look and what I eat and health and fitness has, you know, taken over my life. And it's painful. And it's also painful to let go just a little bit and try to make small progress and then like have some more wiggle room in my life with what I ate. And that was hard too, but there were so many more blessings that came from that, because now I have a much healthier relationship
Mm,
with food, with external validation, with the way I saw myself. Because, and I think part of it was because I still saw the like heavier version of me from my past
mm,
that I based my lifestyle and what I needed to do on that. And I was like, oh, I still am not like comfortable with who I see in the mirror. I need to keep losing weight, or I need to keep eating better so that I can get better at, you know, seeing that person. And
right.
that wasn't the issue at all. The issue was I literally had to, you know, go to therapy. I had to change the way I talked to myself. I had to change the way I saw my past. I had to
Uh-huh.
change a lot of things inside of me
Right.
in order for me to improve that person that I saw in the mirror.
I love it. So, because we are in nutrition class, I'm gonna do just one more question.
Yeah.
Um, what does your diet look like right now?
Um, like I said, I try to eat well, like 90% of the time. I think I eat mostly whole foods. I mean, a lot of fish, a lot of like chicken, eggs, a lot of vegetables, fruit. Like, I don't really deprive myself of any food group, you know. I eat it all. I'll eat like, you know, red meat from time to time. I'll eat game, like I like elk, I like bison, like stuff like that. Um, and then also like, you know, protein powder and stuff like that for just snacks and workouts. And then outside of that, like outside of like what I eat as far as my traditional diet, I still leave wiggle room to eat like a little bit unhealthy, you know. Like if I'm
Right.
out at a good restaurant, like I'm gonna like, you know, maybe get a dessert, or I'm gonna eat some bread if I'm at a good like Italian restaurant or something like that. I'm
Right.
gonna eat ice cream if I'm at a good like homemade ice cream shop. Or I mean, I can go on with examples, but I just don't deprive myself like I used to.
And do you track still, or did you ever track?
I tracked for a long time what I ate, tracked my calories, tracked macros. So I just because I've been doing it for so long, I have an idea of what stuff equates to, how many calories are in certain things. And because it's a lot easier when you eat whole foods to know how many calories are in an egg, how many calories are in like a cup of like broccoli, right? Because there's not a lot of other things that you have to worry about within that meal or whatever. But I now know, like, I'm like, all right, if I need to eat 2,000 calories a day, I'm just making that up, I know exactly what I can do to accomplish that. I know, like, if I need to get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, I know like how I can get there, right? I know that if I want to get enough fiber every day, I know how to get there. I know how to, do all these other things that can help me get to that goal. But it's all because I had a foundation. I created a foundation. I learned how to track things. I got really good at measuring and just being consistent, and also just being the fact that I'm in the business, that it's part of my job to understand this stuff. So it's helped me create habits that last.
Yeah, I think the whole foods aspect is so critical. It's so difficult to overeat when it's all whole foods, unless maybe it's like a lot of carby stuff. Like I know I could eat a ton of sweet potatoes if left to my own devices, so you have to know yourself. You have to know your relationship to those foods. Do they trigger something in your brain, or can you just moderate,
For sure.
And last question before I ask you to share where people can find you. How's your workout regimen? How often do you work out, and do you count steps as well?
I never really used to focus on steps. One, because I just knew that I was always like active and walking around, that I knew that based on the way I was based on the way that I, was kind of performing during my workouts and throughout the day. And then also based on my physique, that I knew I was like getting enough steps in. Plus I focused more on like cardio. Like I'm somebody who loves to lift weights, to lift, depending on the week, I would say anywhere between, an average like 4 to 5 times a week. Maybe sometimes, some weeks it might be 3, sometimes it might be 6, but on average it's like 4 to 5. But I also like enjoy running, and not because it's not really from a weight loss perspective necessarily. It's more like it's very therapeutic for me. Like I think of it as a moving meditation, to where it's like just a nice slow jog, listening to music. Sometimes it's like inspirational music. Sometimes it's music that pumps me up, but I'm able to like process a lot of stuff like I talked about earlier, where fitness and exercising became a great mechanism to process a lot of the pain in my life. So it's kind of the same thing today, where again, like, just because I'm not using substances to numb my pain doesn't necessarily mean that life's a cakewalk, right?
Right.
Still has its challenges, and I still need some time to process and think things through. And running is a great tool for that. So I try to get in like 2 to 3, running sessions a week.
Yeah.
Mainly in the evenings or later on in the day, or sometimes it's like right after the gym. If I have a kind of a packed schedule and I only have a certain amount of time that I've allotted to work out, it's like, all right, I'll lift for like 40 minutes, then I'll go for a 30-minute run, then I got to take a shower, get something to eat, and then go right back to what I was doing before.
Yeah, I love it. I feel the same way about running, and that's why I do it. Really, it's very therapeutic for me as well. So I completely understand. Thank you so much, Doug, for being with us. I hope this was helpful for everybody. I know it's just so inspiring. Eric says, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much, Eric. Where can people find you?
So the best place to find me is everything's on like my website, which is dougbopst.com. And there's links to buy my books. There's links to other interviews that I've done. There's just more information about my story and kind of what I do. And then I'm most active on Instagram at Doug Bopst. Then I'm at Doug Bopst on like Twitter and I think TikTok. And so, yeah, I mean, if this inspired you and you want to follow along with the journey, feel free. And I appreciate you, Sarah, having me on, and hopefully this was helpful.
Absolutely. And also, Giselle says, thank you so much, Doug, for telling your story. I'm really glad that you've come a long way and really changed your life for the better. Alexandra says, thank you so much. Gilda, thank you so much. So This was a success. Thank you so much, Doug. I'm gonna make sure I link all of your social media and website in the description box below, because I'm gonna edit this for YouTube. Other than that, yeah, hopefully we'll do a round 2, or some maybe an Instagram live in the future.
Yeah.
We'll stay connected.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.